if this works, then
Oh, so now you're gonna do YouTube? You're doing?
I'm going to do YouTube.
Gotcha.
Hold on.
And then can you stream it back over to Facebook?
I don't know. So we get real creative.
It should be. Well, we can just try to share it and see what happens.
If this works.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Oh, so now you're gonna do YouTube? You're doing?
I'm going to do YouTube. Okay.
Gotcha.
Hold on.
And then can you stream it back over to Facebook?
I don't know. So we get real creative.
It should be. Well, we can just try to share it and see what happens.
If this works. Oh,
yeah, there it is.
Oh, so now you're gonna do YouTube? You're doing?
I'm going to do YouTube. Okay.
Gotcha.
Hold on.
And then can you stream it back over to Facebook?
I don't know. So we get real creative.
It should be. Well, we can just try to share it and see what happens.
If this works. Oh,
yeah, there it is.
Oh, so now you're gonna do YouTube? You're doing?
I'm going to do YouTube. Okay.
Gotcha.
Hold on.
And then can you stream it back over to Facebook?
I don't know. So we get real creative.
It should be. Well, we can just try to share it and see what happens.
If this works.
Anything on your computer screen, just. Oh, so now you're gonna do YouTube? You're doing?
I'm going to do YouTube. Okay.
And then can you stream it back over to Facebook?
I don't know. So we get real creative.
It should be. Well, we can just try to share it and see what happens.
If this works.
Anything on your computer screen, just. Oh, so now you're gonna do YouTube? You're doing?
I'm going to do YouTube. Okay.
And then can you stream it back over to Facebook?
I don't know. So we get real creative.
It should be. Well, we can just try to share it and see what happens.
If this works.
Anything on your computer screen, just. Oh, so now you're gonna do YouTube? You're doing?
I'm going to do YouTube. Okay.
And then can you stream it back over to Facebook?
I don't know. So we get real creative. Okay, guys.
That was so dramatic.
That was a lot. Hold on. I don't know.
Did you hear it keep repeating the same thing over and over and over again? I was like, this. This thing don't shut up.
Right.
Okay.
Woo. All right.
Is this even going live at all? Can somebody see?
I don't.
What's your channel? I can go to YouTube.
No, to Facebook.
I can't. Let me see. I don't see it live.
You don't see it live at all?
I see a link to YouTube.
Okay.
You have?
I don't even see that. Oh,
you
now
posted
I
a
see
link
it. On her page.
On the page, okay.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, yeah, I see a link.
Is it live?
YouTube.com.
And it's live. When I'm
on
live? YouTube, I hear ourselves talking right now.
Okay.
So we just go.
What's your channel?
It will take you right to.
If you go to my page and go to the link, it'll take you directly to the page.
Got it.
Oh my. Okay.
We're live.
We're live.
Finally.
All right, I'm going to minimize this and let me see if I can get this together here.
No, I can't mute it.
You can do what?
I'm trying to mute.
Just turn it down, Jeanette.
Okay.
All right. Can you do me a favor? All right. So we did that. We're live, and we just need to see. I'm not sure if we see people live on YouTube or if we're going to see them live on Facebook.
Yeah.
YouTube, because I had to click the link.
The YouTube? Okay.
To YouTube, and then I saw it live.
Okay. All right. So let me just come back over here and tell them we're joined YouTube. Okay.
Proud of you.
Guys, you are such good stewards.
Absolutely, this is good. I mean, it's all good.
They're too mad.
And then if you guys can share it.
That's what I'm trying to get to your page. Like,
okay.
She's editing the post right
now. Oh no.
What's wrong?
I'm trying to put it. Hold on. Oh, shiggity. I'm trying to learn how to copy the link so I can just go into my actual YouTube.
Okay.
That's what I'm wanting to do.
I'm giving it to you now. All right. I tagged y'all on it. Did I tag you, Jeanette? I did not.
Leaving me out. That's what I'm
Sorry.
doing.
Okay, you tagged me in something. Let me see.
Okay.
Good.
Way to be innovative. Okay.
That's it.
Okay. Thank you so much for your patience. I appreciate you guys. You're wonderful. You're awesome. And you're wonderful. So we're going to go ahead and get started because it is 7:34 and we want to make sure that we are mindful of the time. And even if people join late, that's fine. They can always go back and watch it from the beginning so that they can get caught up. And any questions that they have that we are not able to answer right here on the live broadcast, we will make sure that the presenters are able to get on there and answer those questions for them. So I appreciate everyone who is watching and who will be watching in the very near future. My name is Portia J. Zaire. I am a registered nurse here in Columbus, Ohio. My background is in acute care and primary and community health, and I am a nurse educator. I have a desire to make sure that the African American community, along with every other underrepresented community and vulnerable populations, have all of the information that they need in order to live healthier lives. That is super important to me because I feel like false narratives and misinformation runs rampant in our communities. And we have a lot of old adages and we have a lot of things that we do based off of culture and generations and what we've seen and what we've heard, as opposed to getting the facts and the knowledge in order then to make informed decisions. So the whole point, the goal, the outcome, when you leave this live, when you leave this forum, is to walk away with resources, tools, and information to help you make the best decisions for your life and your health, and then those who are a part of your family and your close-knit community. So thank you so much for joining us. I have with me several people who are going to introduce themselves. We have two main speakers, Dr. Sharon Faison. She's from the University of Michigan, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about herself. And we also have Carmela Hill, who is an expert and a professional in the mental health space, behavioral health space. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves, and then we have some other guests who's going to introduce themselves after they get done.
Hi, I'm Dr. Shannon Faison, and I'm born and raised in Columbus, Ohio. I'm also a second-year otolaryngology resident surgeon at the University of Michigan here in Ann Arbor.
I'm Carmela Hill. I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor with supervising credentials here in the state of Ohio. I have over 21 years of experience in the mental health and behavioral health world. Currently a director at a mental health agency. I've taught counseling courses as well at a local university and presented and talked about this subject matter for a number of years now. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. In addition to these two wonderful young ladies who decided to grace us with their knowledge and expertise, I have on the line Diana Alomar, who so graciously decided to spend her evening with us after spending a long day on the front lines with her nursing staff from New York City. Diana, do you want to say hi?
Hi, I'm Diana Alomar. I live in New York City. I actually live in Washington Heights, where we are the epicenter of Manhattan right now. We have the most cases. I've been a nurse for 22 years. Most of it has been in ambulatory care nursing. And for about the last 6-7 years, I've been in a professional staff development. So I oversee the nursing education department for one of the hospitals here in New York City.
Awesome. And then we have Tarsha Wooldridge, who's joining us from Ohio as well. Tarsha, would you like to say hi?
Hi, my name is Tarsha Wooldridge. I've been a nurse for 30 years, very diverse background. And I am now an RN manager at Access Point Community Health Centers, which is an FQHC here in Northeast Ohio.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I wanted to first spend some time giving you some resources for some credible websites that you can go to get information, because we know that it's been very noisy in the world lately with a lot of information. Some of it is good and some of it is not so good. So when you're trying to figure out information as it relates to what is going on right now with the coronavirus, I would admonish you to go to the CDC website, and that's just cdc.gov. They're going to have information that covers the span of the United States. And you can just click on here on this little tab here, and it will give you more information that you would ever need. It talks about the signs and symptoms. It talks about the rate of exposure. It talks about any treatment that they have going on for right now. It talks about the testing that has been put into place. It talks about any vaccines or antibody testing that they're trying to do. And it generally has all of the healthcare information around COVID for the United States of America. If you live in Ohio, I would like to show you the coronavirus.ohio.gov website. This is very important. If you don't live in Ohio, just Google your state and coronavirus, and then it should take you to the public health department for your state. So if you're in Michigan, Google Michigan Department of Health, coronavirus, and it should have a website that pops up for you. That information is going to be specific to your state. Remember that when you're dealing with government and public health, they can only give you the information that they've collected, okay? And we all know that government runs very slow, even in a pandemic. So the information that they are collecting from local municipalities and hospitals, it has to travel through the ranks in order to get it to that public health department. And then so their numbers may not be as up to date. So the next day it may be updated for that previous day. So you may not have all of the information that you're looking for into that following day. But make sure that you're going to these local governments and the CDC in order to get the latest information regarding health-related information for COVID-19. I did want to just show you this for Ohio. If you have any questions, all of the public health departments should have some type of hotline number. This is the number that you can call, 1-833-4ASK-ODH. So that if you have questions, they have licensed nurses and infectious disease professionals who are on staff to answer your questions. And I'm thinking this is true in Michigan and New York State, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I wanted to, before we get into talking about what we want to talk about, I want to kind of frame the discussion so that you can understand why is this a big deal. Okay, when we're looking at these numbers, in the state of Ohio alone, we've had almost 9,000 cases that have been confirmed through testing. Okay, we have 418 total deaths. 401 of those deaths have been confirmed patients who were COVID positive and died from complications of that disease. 17 of those deaths right here are deaths that ranked on clinical data and clinical presentation. They think possibly had COVID-19 and they died from those symptoms, which bring us to a total of 418 deaths. Okay, we have tested, and I had a website up and I had to shut it down, but we have tested probably around 78,000 people in the state of Ohio. And we have about 11.6 million people in the state of Ohio. I want you to frame that in your mind. We've only tested less than 0.1% of the population in the state of Ohio. If we had access to greater tests, then our numbers will possibly be higher, okay? So when we're going through this presentation, I want you to keep in the back of your mind that even though we're testing, we are not testing widespread. In the state of Ohio alone, we have only tested about 78,000 people and 11.6 million people live in the state. So keep that in the back of your mind when you're saying it's not that bad, it's just like the flu. What does this mean? It means we don't have enough data. We're not testing nearly as many people that we should be testing. Okay, so that was just like my disclaimer. So Dr. Shannon, you're up.
All right. So I just want to give some background about what viruses are, just to give us a frame of reference to understand this COVID-19 or coronavirus. So viruses are very small infectious agents that survive by infecting cells of living organisms. So that includes us as humans, animals, and plants. And they're made up of genetic material, either DNA or RNA. And that will be important once I explain what this corona or COVID-19 virus is. But it's surrounded by what we call a capsid to protect that genetic material. Some viruses have a second layer of protection called an envelope. And the coronavirus or COVID-19 actually has envelope as well as influenza or the flu. And so this really explains why soap is important, because that envelope is made up of fat and soap dissolves fat. And so that's why hand washing is so important with this particular type of virus, the COVID-19, because it has the envelope, soap dissolves it, and we need to wash our hands at least 20 seconds. But the way viruses infect humans, they invade our cells because they have proteins on their envelopes that are similar to the cell or similar to the proteins that we have on our cells. And so our cell recognizes it as something that is not foreign or it's not dangerous, and it lets it inside. And then once it's inside of our cells, it hijacks all of our cellular materials and machinery and makes copies of itself, hundreds of copies. And then it gets, makes these copies to infect other cells. And so that's really kind of the natural history. It's much more complicated, but that's just kind of a brief overview of what viruses are, how they infect our cells. And once they make all of those copies of itself, it goes out to infect other cells. So with this whole coronavirus, I know so many terms are thrown around. Is it coronavirus? Is it COVID-19? Is it SARS-CoV-2? So I'll break that down. So coronavirus is really a family. So you can think of it as an umbrella of viruses, a large family of viruses, some that cause mild upper respiratory symptoms, some that cause, like the COVID-19, really severe respiratory disease. Some infect the GI tract, some infect the central nervous system. But for COVID-19, it's a specific strain, and it's called SARS-CoV-2. And SARS stands for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome. I don't know if you guys or many of you remember back in 2003 when the SARS virus came out, but it's in the family of that same virus. It's an RNA virus, getting back to what that genetic material is, and it's actually spread through droplets. And so I know there's discussion of, is this in the air? We're all wearing masks now. The CDC first said we didn't need to wear masks, and now they're telling everyone to wear masks. But it is what we think spread through droplet, and it has the potential to become aerosolized with some procedures, particularly in the medical field. Certain things we do can cause the particles to break up and become aerosolized. But if this was truly something that was airborne, the infectious rate would be much higher, like tuberculosis or measles. And that's not what we're seeing. It's infecting a ton of people, but not the way it would be if it were truly an airborne virus. But it's droplets. And it binds to the type 2 lung cells, we call them pneumocytes. And that's how it's able to cause this particular type of respiratory illness. And you'll see some patients have mild disease. They're able to stay home and quarantine and take Tylenol and really get themselves through it at home. And then you have this other or second cohort where they're hospitalized, they're intubated, or have a breathing tube placed to help them breathe. And then ones that develop what we call ARDS, or acute respiratory distress syndrome. And I'll break that down in just a bit, but then have that severe form of respiratory illness. And then that leads to death. And so with ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome, the way it works, gas exchange in the lungs happens at the level of the alveoli. These are really thin air-filled sacs that allow oxygen to come in and carbon dioxide to be exhaled out. But with ARDS, and the way this virus attacks the lung cells, it makes squamous debris that builds up so thick that gas is no longer able to exchange through those thin walls the way evolution made it and the way God made it. And when you have a barrier so thick where you cannot exchange gas, that's what leads to severe, what we call hypoxemia, or low oxygen levels. And so when oxygen is not able to diffuse into the blood from the lungs, you're pumping blood that doesn't have oxygen or deoxygenated blood to the body, and your organs need oxygen to stay alive. And so you have multi-organ failure because of the lack of oxygen. And so that's really the pathophysiology, what we call it. That's how it's killing people, and particularly people of color. And that I'm going to save that for last because that is a kind of a big topic. But the typical symptoms are fever, cough, shortness of breath, and you may have been hearing some buzz about anosmia or the inability to smell. And that's one of those things where some cases, that's the only symptom someone may have is, oh, I can't smell so well. And knowing what we know now, that's something to be evaluated for. And it's, if you have itchy, watery eyes, maybe that's your allergies. If that's you in this time period, okay. But if you normally can smell and then all of a sudden you cannot smell, then you should be evaluated, because that may be the only symptom you're presenting with. And the way they test, there are swabs or nasopharyngeal swabs. You'll see those little Q-tip looking things that you have to put up your nose. It's pretty far. It's painful as well, but it's nothing to scare you away from being tested, because if you're having symptoms, it's serious enough that you should be tested. And they send it for a special test, polymerase chain reaction, or PCR, in the lab. And that time frame for the test to come back, it's variable. It can take up to 4 days or up to 2 weeks. Some tests here in the hospital only take 8 hours. And so it's variable of, how long it takes for the test to come back. You also may hear things about the antibody test, and that's actually being used more now that some people are surviving and leaving the hospital. And so there, we're just looking at the antibody response. So again, going back to that virus, it has coronaviruses, or COVID-19, have that envelope. And so the way the body attacks that is by antibodies. And so with that antibody testing, it's a blood test, is looking at if you have the typical antibodies that would fight a virus. And I won't get into this particular type of antibodies, but that's what that's looking for. And it's not looking for if you have the infection, it's if you had the antibodies to fight the infection. So it's really a marker of if you've had it and you've mounted the appropriate immune response to it. And again, touching on the difference between the flu, because everyone's like, well, is this the same as the flu? Is this more deadly as the flu? Well, we know so much more about the flu. The flu kills people every year. The flu is very infectious, but the key difference is we know so much more about the flu. The flu has been around for a long time. It's been studied by scientists. We have a vaccine, whereas COVID-19, this is uncharted territory. Nobody really knows. And we're using data out of China to help guide what we're doing here in the US. And it's nobody really knows. And we're all scrambling to find the answers and stop this mortality rate and morbidity. But that's really the difference. And so it's going to take a while for us to truly understand what's going on and ways to combat it and to form the vaccine. And we'll talk about that too, because those are being made. There are treatments available, but they're all in clinical trials. So the hydroxychloroquine or Plaquenil, that's a big one that President Trump tried to endorse. Well, actually, he did endorse. But that's usually reserved for people with rheumatologic diseases. And it is being trialed to see if that would be a helpful option in patients with this virus. But again, they're clinical trials, so we don't have very good evidence on, is it working, is it helpful, is it safe to be given for patients with the virus. And so again, looking at Michigan got hit pretty hard with this virus, particularly in Detroit. And so I think now we're at, April 17th, Ann Arbor and Washtenaw County in general is doing well in terms of social distancing. Governor Whitmore, she put the executive order for stay at home, I think it was on March 23rd. And since that time, the level of social distancing has helped. And so we're seeing less cases at the University of Michigan. And so we're slowly starting to ramp things up back at the hospital because, we canceled all, elective cases that weren't urgent or emergent. People coming to clinics, they were, either switched to a virtual visit or we just weren't seeing them just because of their risk of getting sick or their risk to us. And so things have halted, but they're slowly starting to come back, to ground level. And so there is some hope there. Detroit, they're still a little bit behind, but I think things are going in the right direction, at least in Michigan. I'd be interested to hear about what's going on in New York. And so that really leads me back to, well, why are Black people dying at higher rates? And I would challenge everyone to think, well, this is nothing new. Black people have been dying at higher rates from cardiovascular disease, as all the diseases you can think of. Black people are affected more. And so it really takes you have to look at historical context and also social determinants of health. And the big categories for social determinants of health are economic stability, neighborhood and physical environment, education, food, community and social context, and healthcare systems. And each of those major categories of social determinants of health, I'll try to break these down here. You have employment, income, expenses, debt, medical bills, and support. And all of those categories, you're like, yep, Black people are hit the hardest at each of those levels. Employment is lower, income is lower, expenses are higher, debt is higher, medical bills are higher. And then for neighborhood and physical environment, housing, transportation, safety, parks, playgrounds. For education, literacy, language, early childhood education, higher education with food, this hunger and the problem of access. In certain neighborhoods, there's not a store in a 20-mile radius, and it's just like, they call those food deserts. And so, but the McDonald's down the street is the closest thing, and they have a dollar menu. And so what options and access do we truly have? With the community and social context, again, social systems, community engagement, discrimination, stress, and then with the healthcare system, healthcare coverage, people not trusting the medical system for good reason, and then just quality of care and implicit bias. And so in each of these categories, African Americans and minorities suffer. And so when you think of social determinants of health, that really impacts health outcomes. You don't think, oh, well, how can someone having a lower education affect their health? Well, there's so many ways each of those categories affect health, and it's important for us as health providers to think of these and consider these when we're putting in new policies or new legislation. So think about the stay-at-home order. Less than 30% of Americans have the ability to work from home. And so staying at home, is that really practical for more than 30% of the US? No. And social distancing is really a privilege. In the African American community, there's multi-generational housing. And so we can't just go in one area of the basement and be 6 feet apart from someone else. And you just have to really think, these policies we put in place, they're going to help, but are they going to put vulnerable populations at risk? And a lot of things are. And when we're thinking about shortage of healthcare resources, they're creating these systems where we rank who's going to be treated. And so if a certain treatment option is going to be available, well, we have to treat the person that's going to have the most likelihood of survival. But when you think about that policy, when you have these point systems and you start ranking people who's more likely to survive, then you start really exposing, okay, who has the worst health outcomes? African Americans. Who has the highest burden of illness in communities? African Americans. And so again, even that policy leads itself to bias. And so it really takes time for you to think about, okay, what's happened in history? What policies are in place? What do social determinants of health, how do they play in health outcomes? And realize there's so many areas for improvement. There's no easy and fast answer. We're at the same place we were decades ago. We've made improvements, but overall, it's just this virus is really exposing what we really need to work on.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. You mentioned something about the stay-at-home measures that have taken place, and the last time I looked was on Tuesday or Wednesday. There were 40. How many states we have? 50. So there were 43 states who had a stay-at-home order in place. There were 7 states at that time that did not. And I think the closer we get to the end of the month, you're going to see those restrictions lifted for one reason or the other. But at that time, Iowa, Nebraska, North Dakota, South Dakota, Utah, Wyoming, and Arkansas were the only states that did not have stay-at-home orders in place. And I don't know if you guys kept up with the news, but the meat packaging plant that had that big outbreak and they had to close down, that was in South Dakota.
Wow.
With no stay-at-home orders in place.
And people are protesting in Michigan. What?
And blocking the entrance to the hospital. Come on, y'all.
Right.
So I think that the stay-at-home measures that we are putting in place are helping. Ohio, I think, has been doing a really good job so far of keeping the curve flattened. Our systems are not overran. The health systems in Columbus run a little bit differently than they do in Cleveland. And when I moved down here, I was shocked because they decided decades ago that they were going to join together and funnel all of their acutely ill children to Nationwide Children's Hospital. But back home, everybody got a children's hospital. So that was weird to me. So they don't work the way that we worked up north. So the way that they're handling this pandemic, again, it says applause, because they're working together thinking, how can we keep Central Ohioans safe? How can we make sure that our nurses, our firefighters, our police, our doctors are safe? And they came together with the hospital association, and they met with the city and the mayor and the governor, and the convention center has already been prepped and is already ready for a surge. So when we do start to see a surge, all three of the health systems minus Nationwide, because they figured that because the way that it's been going, Nationwide won't have a surge, that Ohio Health, Ohio State, and Mount Carmel, they will be able to overflow into the convention center. And they are really working well in this region, I think, to make sure that our healthcare workers are safe and that we can take care of the patients who need to be taken care of. So I think it does matter what our leadership is doing to help manage it. Okay, so Carmela, talk to us a little bit about mental health and all of this.
Yikes. Certainly what we've seen in the initial onset of the pandemic, and just talking from a definition standpoint, pandemic already implies panic. It does. And so that already sets almost a tone that one should panic, because it implies widespread panic. And with that perspective, it already shields and does a filter to the psyche and the mind and the mental health and emotional health that I should probably panic now. And individuals take that, particularly those that may be have pre-existing mental health issues. So it's going to exacerbate that for them, it's going to increase that for those individuals. And then those that did not have any mental health history, they will probably start to develop some things because of that, again, quote unquote, panic. And so some initial reactions that we've seen is symbolic to grief. And so I'll talk about that a little bit towards the end, but that initial reaction is that shock. You know, what is going on? What is happening? The uncertainty of things, not sure from one thing to another, hearing different things and not knowing what's explained well to us, or what's put out there in one instance is refuted in another. And so a lot of the confusion and just that initial shock of not knowing what is going on here. And then some people will transition into what would be denial. You know, oh, it's not that bad. I mean, I've heard it, I've seen it, I've experienced it. Where you say, oh, it's not that bad, or it's not that serious, or it's just the flu. You know, as Dr. Shannon was referring to, some people think and put in that same category of the flu. And so they think, oh, we can manage it, we can handle it. We've seen the flu, so it's okay. And so sometimes that denial or not really paying attention to the extreme or the severity, not the extreme, excuse me, the severity of the issue might become a problem. Some other things that perhaps are some initial reactions is just the anxiety and the panic has increased for individuals. Again, that nervousness, that uncertainty, the unknown increases that level of anxiety and panic for individuals. And then some things that as we move from that initial kind of phase, if you will, when you're talking about the grief process in some ways, then people kind of move to where we get settled. So we get some information, we learn some things, we have a little bit more understanding. We sort of get out of that, again, that shock and that denial phase. And we come to a point where we say, okay, this is real. This is something that I need to pay attention to. And then at that point, we become a little bit settled in what is happening. But then we move into a new normal to where, how do I now behave in this season, in this frame of reference, that is different from my previous routine? And so then you have to now shift your mindset to say, oh, I'm used to doing this and that and everything else, and now I can't do this and that and everything else. And so that changes the dynamic in a person's mental and emotional health, because in one instance, they were able to just go, move, shake, operate. Things were just moving and shaking left and right, barely had time to breathe, right? But then when we come into the new normal, we have to now restructure things and come to some idea of, oh, I'm staying at home and working, or I'm not working, or I'm laid off, or on and on and on. And so now that changes the dynamic of a person's mental and emotional health, to where now we need to look at some red flag things that could be going on that perhaps people didn't have to deal with prior to this point. And so getting out of that routine, people sometimes lose sight of the very things that you didn't have to look at before. You didn't worry so much about your sleep and your appetite. You had your setup and your routine. You were up at whatever time, went to bed at whatever time. You ate whatever you did, your 3 meals, your 2 meals, whatever you did. You had, again, a pattern and a routine. But having this pandemic and everything that's going on, and particularly the stay-at-home order for most individuals, it is changing the dynamic of how we are responding to life.
Yeah.
And that's huge. It's changing the dynamic of how we're responding to life. And so now you have to pay attention to your sleep habits. You have to pay attention to your appetite habits. You have to pay attention to, and I'm not referring to just the health portions of things, but just the frequency of just being bored, perhaps. When people are putting it out there on social media, I'm bored, I don't know what to do, I'm losing my mind, those kinds of things, because we were not used to having these chunks of time. This is a chunk of time of just sitting, in essence. And then also the danger perhaps in that, or the challenge, is that now we have an opportunity to absorb a whole lot of information that may not be the best. And it may create more challenges in our minds and our mental health, because now I can take in all those things that perhaps I didn't have time to do. I didn't have an interest to worry about even dealing with it, because you had your routine in your life. But now that's out of the picture. You have another way of looking at life now. And so paying attention to our sleep habits, increase time on our hands. We're bored. We're not moving about like we were used to doing. Some other things too is paying attention to being irritable and agitated. We're now confined, we're restricted, we're not able to escape people, certain individuals and certain circumstances and all of that. We're not able to escape. We're not able to avoid. We're not able to leave. We're not able to take our breaks. So I'm going from more of the maladaptive kinds of things to we're not able to take our breaks from individuals and circumstances, because now we're entrenched in it to a point, day in and day out, hour and hour. And so that is now impacting our mental health and our emotional health. So that irritability and agitation is probably skyrocketing now. It really is. It really is. Some other things to pay attention to: appetite increased again because we're bored, or just the fact that we have a lot of time to now be able to have a breakfast, a lunch, a dinner, and then you're thinking about in between the snacks, when before your routine was just so standard. You were operating and moving and shaking to the point where you didn't think about perhaps a snack. You didn't think about lunch. You would go 8 hours. For me, let me just be honest, go 8 hours sometimes and not having ate a really good meal. You may be grazed in some ways, or grab this on the way to a meeting, or grab that on the way to the last 15 meetings of the day. But the reality is that has kind of shifted things in some ways. And so that increase in, again, sleep, appetite, etc. Some other things that we've noticed, of course, the increase in depression. And we need to pay attention to how that might look for you compared to someone else. If someone else had pre-existing kind of depression issues, they may already know what their triggers are. They may already know what their red flag situations are. They may already know, okay, when I start to do X, Y, and Z, I'm going into a depressive mode now. Okay. For others who may not have that backdrop, may lose sight of, wow, I haven't got out of bed for 3 days. Because they're thinking, hey, I got a lot of time, I'm just chilling. But what we don't realize is that if we get out of the normal routine and then we go into this slump, if you will, and just not doing anything with the time we have, we can slip into a depression and we don't know it. And so because, again, the sleep is increased, The appetite is increased. So now you get people start to pay attention to now their weight. They feel bloated. They feel, you're not up moving about. So then you see a shift. If you can see and look back at our timelines and social media and just even the news flashes and things, we've moved to where, okay, get active in the house. Get active in the home, walk outside or whatever, because we realize, oh, we've been sitting stagnant in some ways for a week now, 2 weeks or whatever. So then we saw this splurge and surge of, okay, get those workout videos on, get those, YouTube, to get you up and moving, because there's something about that movement that keeps our mind motivated and in a more healthier mind frame. So significant research is out there about depression and improving your moods by exercising, by getting up and being about. And so something like that is very significant to help, again, improve that mood. So in addition to medication and all of that, I'll leave that to the doctor to deal with that. Some other pieces when it comes to the grief that I want to talk about, because I think we've maybe shielded or are not as aware about that loss that we've experienced. It is a loss. A lot of physical loss have happened where individuals have passed away and died from complications from COVID-19. And then not being able to grieve those individuals in ways that we would normally do, such as gathering together. Think about the Black community, gathering together, having feasting times, having times where we're just connecting, physically connecting, not just over the phone. We'll go and take food to people's homes or whatever, or go out to eat or whatever, or have repasses and things like that. When you can't even gather to grieve in solitude together, in a funeral home or service or memorial or whatever it might be, because of the pandemic that's going on and the stay-at-home order. So it's just shifted things that we would quote unquote normally do in our routine of things, in our responses to things, that now we can't. That is a loss. That is a significant loss. And I don't think we've looked at those various layers of that loss. So a loss of your routine, a loss of what you normally might do in response to give comfort and to give motivation, to give strength, and to give even a peace of mind in some ways. So now we're at a point where I don't have, if you will, that foundational piece, that comfort piece. And so that shifts things for us. Again, it kind of gets us out of our routine. And so that impacts our motivation. And if it impacts our motivation, it is going to impact our moods. Our moods are going to go down. They're going to plummet. And I even noticed for myself, to be honest, where, again, as they say, essential workers and all of that. And I'm going to put a post up at some point that, when we're free or we're able to roam about the country, as we have done before, I'm going to put out there that essential workers need to have 2 weeks of quarantine, because I promise you, my life hasn't stopped. I haven't had a break. I feel like I'm about to just about crack, but that is because the routine of things have continued for me in my life and what I'm doing. Now it has shifted a great deal when it comes to moving and shaking and operating within a constrained and confined way of operating. But I'm getting up. I feel like I've already worked 1,000 hours prior to COVID. Then the pandemic that I'm working now, 1,200,000, you know what I mean? It just seems like that, because the pull, the mental pull and the emotional pull from the job responsibility and from the staff responsibility, from the different areas of what we were held to do is change. You have that in addition to trying to manage this. Trying to manage the very things I'm talking about, increase that, increase this. It's definitely changed things. So it's added extra, if you will, mental and emotional stress. I can't imagine those that are in the hospitals. Now, as Portia knows, I do evaluations in the ER for psychiatric admissions and things like that. So that has been a whole nother animal in itself. To go in when nursing and medical is not my area, but I really have to walk down those same corridors in that same environment. We had to suit up. We had to do all of those things to go in and do my portion of mental health. I can't imagine what it would be if I was going in as a nurse and I was going in as a surgeon or a doctor of some sort, a lab tech or whatever. Now, thank goodness we've gotten out of it and we're now in telehealth instead of going to the ER. I can do it from, remote. So that has changed, and that helped release some of that tension that, oh my God, I'm going in to do one thing. I could get, I can encounter, let's just be honest about it.
So you know what? It's not even just going to the hospital, okay? Mm-hmm. It's going to the grocery store.
Yes.
It's going to get gas. It's going to, well, really, that's the only places you're going. But
right.
And I was telling my girlfriend, I said, this is a researcher's dream, right? Because no, it is. Think about it.
True.
Think about it. They're going to have so many data points because we
very true.
Pulsating adrenaline and cortisol through our blood 24/7 because you are on edge, you are afraid, your mind is racing. When I sit in my car and I'm thinking to myself, like, I'm not gonna be able to breathe because I got this mask on. I don't want nobody touching me. You looking at folks like, why you're walking so close to my car? Like, you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's madness. It really is.
It's real. And can you imagine living in fear? That's what people, now I get it. Like if I wasn't in an abusive
You get it.
I get it.
Yes.
You're in constant fear of your life.
Yes.
From an unknown enemy. You don't even know if you don't know if you have it and you're a carrier.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
and
exactly.
I have my mom here who is, her health is moderate. And she's of that vulnerable population. Mm-hmm. And then I have me and my husband, and I have these children, which they're saying are super spreaders, but they're not getting sick. Mm-hmm. So they haven't really had any issues, but I'm concerned, like, okay, I go to the store and then now they're talking about the soles of your feet. It's overkill. Like I got to wash my groceries. I got to derobe. I got to worry about
derobe. Right. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so think about that. Now, if you almost want to put it in the frame of reference of someone who may be experiencing OCD symptoms, that's exactly it. So now this person now lives like that, where they are afraid to even go. So now people can understand why someone will stay in the home. Why you can't just go out and talk to people and connect and on and on and on. Because of this, because of the unknown in their mind that says, I don't know if I'm going to die today. I don't know if I'm going to contract something. I got to wash my groceries, like you're saying. I'm not going through that. It's easier to what? Stay at home and not deal with that.
I have to stay at home.
See?
And I think, and that's real life because
real life.
I don't like going to the grocery store anyway. So I don't. I do all of my big grocery shopping at the end of the month because I get paid once a month. So we do our big grocery shopping at the end of the month. And then, throughout the month, we'll go and we'll get what we need. Mm-hmm. So that one time spending that hour in the grocery store, that's enough for me.
Yes.
But now when, everybody is at home, so everybody has to eat.
Right.
Everybody has to themselves
constantly.
And it's 5 people in my house.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband works at night. So that means he's home all day. Mm-hmm. Whether he's up or whether he's asleep, he's here. So you got 5 people who are here all day long, every single day.
Help her out, Dr. Shannon. She's about to lose it. She may need a little injection or something because
But wait a minute. And then on top of that, not only are we here all day, but you're expected to perform. I work from home.
Yes.
So I'm expected to perform.
To do.
Okay.
Yes.
But wait a minute, there's more. My children are going to school from home and they are expected to learn.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
I have a senior and Mike is super mild mannered and always have been quiet. He's like I was in my teens where it's just like, whatever, we'll get through it and we'll move on. Okay. But this is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm always like, are you okay? Do you need to talk? Are you fine? Like what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Up all night, sleep all day. And then he's on his video games with his friends. So that's his outlet. So I'm trying to be a little bit more understanding of that time that you need to connect the way that you want to connect. It might not be the way that I would, but it's the way that you want to connect.
Right.
Then I have this 11-year-old who wants to be outside regardless of what the weather is all day long. He used to running and playing. And you're thinking like, okay, but what about me? I'm so concerned about everybody else. You got your students, you got your coworkers, you got your family, you got your parents, you got all these people who are pulling at you. And then you're thinking like, what about me?
Yep.
What about me? Because there's some days where Zaire come and say, are you getting up today?
That becomes your self-care. In some ways, it becomes your self-care, because normally we would do our self-care acts by perhaps going out, again, getting away from, I know I said the avoiding and all of that, but in essence, getting away from and taking a break. So if you don't have a place to be able to take that break physically, I'm not referring to just in your mind. We can escape in our minds all day long. I'm referring to the physical removal from the environment that's increasing whatever it is increasing and triggering whatever. So we need that moment of separation. When you don't have that, so for some, going to the grocery store is not about going and getting groceries. Right. It's about going and having a break, and that's healthy. But it's not in the sense, because you're going to have the challenges of, I could get contracted with some. You see the confusion and the mental anguish and challenge?
It is real. And on that note, we're doing okay in Ohio. We already heard about what's going on in Detroit. Oh, this is what I wanted to bring up about Detroit, because there's a lot of information that's coming across. And the president had made a comment that they were going to be testing out hydroxychloroquine on 3,000 patients in Michigan. I want to talk about that.
Wow.
Okay, let's talk about it, because let's put some fact on it. Okay. The first thing is, your doctor cannot force you to take anything. Okay. I need you guys to share this and get this, okay? So if you find yourself in a hospital setting, or even outpatient, or your family member, and hydroxychloroquine or any other treatment option is presented to you, it is presented to you as an option and not as a mandated treatment, okay? So there is a video that a doctor did, Dr. Corey Hebert, Hebert. He's on Facebook. He's out of Louisiana, and he broke it down so well. So I don't think I have to break it down real well, but he goes into the side effects for metformin and the hydroxychloroquine and all that. So because we know that Black Americans and Hispanic Americans have a higher number in diabetes, and we know metformin is that first line treatment for diabetes, this is very important for you to know before you say, yes, give me that hydroxychloroquine.
Right.
So if you find yourself in a situation where, let's say you are in Michigan or somewhere else, and they're saying, oh, we want to give you hydroxychloroquine, that is an informed decision that you and your physician has to make. Not the government, not the mayor, not the people chirping on the sidelines. It's between you and your treating physician. Now, I looked up on clinicaltrials.gov. clinicaltrials.gov. If you want to see what clinical trials are being federally funded, you can go to clinicaltrials.gov right now, and it will list every clinical trial that has anything to do with COVID-19. Just type in COVID-19. Yep. There were 3 or 4 clinical trials that was related to COVID-19, and I think like 2 of them was with hydroxychloroquine. So even though you hear it as this is what we want to do, that does not mean this is what is happening. So be careful where you're getting your information, because like Carmela says, it creates fear and panic. Like, oh my goodness, they're just going to start putting it in our water and we're going to become guinea pigs. But, but I think that we have to take some time to talk about that, because it's been done. Come on here.
Exactly. Because my mind goes to, you're talking about Tuskegee and all of that, where people.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So if you go to clinicaltrials.gov, you can see what clinical trials with hydroxychloroquine or what other, because they have some other antiviral medications that they're testing with this. It's not just that. This is just the one thing that's been getting a lot of media attention. So they have other things. They were doing the plasma testing with the antibodies, okay? So they're doing this. So if you want to either be a part of it or you want to have more information about it, or if you have a loved one who is in this situation and you're trying to see what other treatment options are there, go to clinicaltrials.gov. And when you click on that clinical trial, it will give you all of the information. It'll tell you the inclusion criteria, meaning what do I have to do to be a part of it? And what are the things that will keep me from being able to be a part of it. And then it'll give you the contact information. So you can hit on that contact information and email or call these clinical research people and ask them and talk to them and say, hey, have you considered doing a clinical trial over here with these patients? We have a whole cluster. Or where are you guys actually doing this? And how do I become a part of it? Or where do I get information from it? So don't get all of your medical information, please, guys, from President Trump.
Oh, God, no.
Yes. My God.
Not whenever he says anything that has anything to do with mental health, behavioral health, physical health,
Cover my ears. Listen. Fact check. Fake news.
Because anecdotally, unfortunately, there have been physicians, there have been dentists, come on here, who have been prescribing hydroxychloroquine to who I don't know, and then going out and filling it for whoever. I don't know if they're like stocking it up for like the friends or something. I don't know. But there's no data behind it.
Not enough.
There's no data.
Not enough.
There's not enough data.
Right.
I did read a clinical trial, and it was very brief. It was 2 weeks in February out of Wuhan. It was only 62 patients. And we all know that 62 patients is a drop in the bucket. It's not going to tell you anything that you need to know as far as efficacy. We're talking about a life-saving drug.
Right.
If you're going to give me something that is supposed to save my life, I'm going to need more than 62 people to take it for you to tell me that is effective. Because that's what it is. It's telling you out of these 62 people, this is what happened. So there was that one clinical trial that happened early on. But even things like what Dr. Shannon said, we're relying on stuff from China. Okay, here's the mic drop on that. Did you guys know that the Chinese government has put extra layers in place for every research that's coming out about COVID? So it has to go through the government before it's published in scholarly journals. So we're not even getting the whole story.
Right. No, what do you think is behind that, though?
Well, you know what's behind it.
It's a communist country. I mean, it's a communist country. They control everything. It's a control. They want to control. They want to make sure that whatever image they want to portray to the world, that's the image that they're going to portray to the world.
Yes.
I have one of my professors at Case. She goes and she actually teaches a cohort every year in China, and even what the students want to study has to get approved, and they don't even have access to be able to even pull certain research. They get it, there's a chance that they might go to jail, they might get fined, they might get removed from school if they come across certain types of research. So it's all about control.
Wow. Yeah.
So that's important, guys. When you are getting your information, again, our government runs slow because they want to dot their I's. For the most part, you're going to have your people who are just, ill-advised and have malintentions. But for the most part, researchers and scientists are fact people. And they want to make sure that they have enough evidence to say that 95 to 99% of the time, if we institute this treatment plan, this is going to be the outcome. And right now, they don't have that data for hydroxychloroquine.
I think where
there is a clinical trial.
Go ahead. No, I think sometimes
there's a clinical trial.
Sorry. I'm thinking
you're fine, go.
Of how the public will leak out some of that small preliminary information and what it does to the rest of the world who may not understand research like we know it. it gives them the false hope and the false sense that this will be, quote unquote, the miracle drug. And I think that is what has happened from a mental and emotional. It becomes this panic again. If it can save 30 out of the 62, hey, we'll take a chance and we'll do it. Even though we haven't did this across thousands of people. We know that's the danger and the limitation with research.
And same with the vaccines. I think once this whole idea starts to unroll and when it does become available, I would say wait on the judgment from your physician, because they're going to be buzz around all over when it. Well, you should wait until a government medical body says we think this is safe to give, and it has to go through so many levels, check systems. But
it does.
You gotta. I would say, as a whole, as a society, a Black community, just wait until we hear more from the medical community to endorse something. And we're not going to endorse something that we think may hurt you. And so it's just one of those things, because I think that's a big buzz now too. Is this vaccine, is it going to come out? Who's going to take it? Oh, I'm not taking it. They're everything. And, there is a big push to get it done fast, but there's still certain checks they cannot bypass. And so rest assured that the science is going to be done correctly. If people are worried about that it's just going to be rushed and bypassed there are laws in place. It has to go through certain checks and balances, but do wait on the advice of your medical professional.
And there are clinical trials already in place for vaccines. Johnson & Johnson has a clinical trial that's out. I think they got about 3,000 people who are taking that. And again, like Dr. Shannon was saying, like there's checks and balances, which means that, in that preliminary clinical trial, we need to make sure there ain't no third eyeballs growing. We need to make sure that folks ain't dropping dead from it, right? And then if anybody who works with vaccines on a regular basis, there is this system called Vaccine Adverse Reporting System, VAERS, VAERS, where when we give a vaccine and our patients come back with complication that we didn't think would happen, we have to report it, or the patient themselves can report it. And the government collects that information. And if we get enough of that, then they have to investigate it. They're either going to pull it, FDA, come on, they're going to pull it, or they're going to have to tell the manufacturers that this is what's happening with your drug. And maybe this group of people or this cohort can't take this medication because it makes them at higher risk. So there's going to be ongoing monitoring. If they do they are going to come up with a different vaccine, just like the flu vaccine, just like the HPV. I think HPV was the latest vaccine that had a lot of rise in it and controversy around it because, it only take one video with folks walking like this. I can be like, what's going on, right?
The citizen, oh, wow.
It only take one video, and it only take one person for it to happen to you. Like, whoa, wait a minute, let me think about this. But I also say this: everything that you ingest has some type of side effect.
That's
everything.
Good. That's good.
Everything. The aspirin that we take when we get a headache. Okay, you take too much of that on an empty stomach, then you might have some GI bleeding. Okay. All right. Too much of that Tylenol that we take when you have that tooth pain. Okay, your liver might be impacted by that. So there is a side effect for every drug that we take. And what science says is, can we weigh the risk against the benefit? And when you are making decisions about your health, you and your physician and your treating provider, you guys need to sit down and weigh the risk against the benefits to say, what's the ratio, and do we really want to move on with this? I wanted to get to Miss Diana. I want you to talk to us about what it looks like in New York City.
It looks like in New York City. So I actually live in Washington Heights. So this is like all the way northern Manhattan. We're at the tip of the northern part of Manhattan, at the border of the Bronx. And we have the largest number of cases. So I was reading an article yesterday that for every 100 people in my zip code that get tested, 62 test positive.
You said every 100? So 62%? Is that what you're saying?
62%. those who are tested, and not everyone is tested. Even if they're symptomatic, very few people get tested. It's when you have to call for the fever that you get tested. Now they're starting to test more healthcare professionals. Because the number of test kits actually came up. It's pretty scary to leave my apartment every day. It's what we were talking about, kind of feeling like you have like obsessive compulsive disorder. So in the morning, that's kind of like what I feel like. And when I get home, like I have this whole ritual, which my husband helps me undress at the door because I don't want to bring in a shoe, my jacket. I don't carry a purse anymore. All this. Then when you get to the hospital, our hospitals, and it's an 11 hospital system in New York City. Initially, our biggest hit hospital was Queens. Queens is a melting pot of like immigrants and people of color. And then it was Brooklyn. Then it was our hospitals on the east side, and now is the Northern Manhattan. Northern Manhattan, in what is made primarily up of is a Dominican community. Most of the people who come here have born in the Dominican Republic, and then our parents had us, and we still live here. So there is a lot of, people that do live together. Like there was a joke going around our friends when Trump said there shouldn't be a gathering of more than 10 people. And then we were like, well, we're all Latino. There's probably more than 10 people living in our apartment with us.
Right.
So how are we going to do that? So there's, a lot of the community, there's most of the people have not been able to stop going to work because they're under some sort of essential workers. They're probably home attendants. They probably work in the grocery stores or in the supermarkets. And so they can't stop going to work. Or those who have stopped going to work, now there's no income in their house. As far as the hospital, I mean, there's been rapid changes. In a 1 week period, we completely stopped all our surgeries. We have 2 floors in one of our hospitals, the one I oversee, the staff development. We have 2 full floors of a 2-floor OR. We only have about 150 nurses in that OR. We only held back 20 nurses for emergency procedures. Every other nurse that works in our ORs or procedural areas like endoscopy, for the most part, almost all the nurses have been deployed to work on the units. So we've been doing a lot of training where you are going from being an OR nurse to being like a nursing attendant to now becoming a med surg nurse. Like they're being upgraded in levels. And so then we're training them in all those different levels. Pretty much there is not one nook and cranny of our hospital that does not have patient beds. Our biggest conference center was just converted into a makeshift military hospital. We have another hospital that's a small community hospital up like on 218th Street at the tip of Manhattan, of Northern Manhattan, and there's a big football field. The football fields over this last weekend was just converted into a hospital, a med surg hospital. And the reasons we started to do that was to so now we're getting nurses from other states. So this morning we received some nurses from Utah and providers from Utah and RTs from Utah that volunteered because their hospital system has started doing, they are prepared for a surge that's never coming. So, or they don't think it's gonna come. So they send them to us. And then we're doing this just to offset the load on the nurses because the acuity of the patients is so great. I mean, we went from like a 50 bed ICU and a 36 bed med-surg step down unit. Those were our COVID bed units. In a matter of 2 days, they were completely full. And so basically, like in our system, there is not any unit that is not a COVID unit. Most of the units are operating on almost an ICU level because of the acuity with the patients. We still have some med-surg step downs, but they're quickly progressing into ICU beds. Some of our children's hospitals, we actually had to have some of our adult patients there, because the other challenge that we're experiencing is that all these patients need some sort of dialysis. So we're running short on CRT machines, we're running short on cyclers. So now we have to move the patients there so we could use the machines from the pediatric population. And it's been a challenge. Every day is a new thing. Everyone's just learning how to do something new every single day. You're being progressed from being a med-surg nurse to an ICU nurse in 2 weeks. We started to do a model like team nursing, where it's stacked, where we have one ICU nurse working maybe with 2 or 3 other non-ICU nurses, one intensivist or a CRNA with like a resident to help manage the patients, because the acuity is just so high. And then there's just the fatigue and the fear of the staff. There's anger. Then there's the patients, in a Latino community, when you're in the hospital, all your family is with you. Everybody's cooking for you. Everyone's, someone's sleeping with you. And for that not to be there, it's been very difficult. And I think just seeing the transformation of the hospital system, where it's like, what we say is there are no rules anymore. This is our new normal. Every day, whatever comes up, we just have to deal with it and just go with the flow. But now at like the 4th or 5th week mark, we're all kind of starting to take a breath, and we're like, okay, we got this. Like we kind of know what we need to do. We're getting it together. We could start handling these patients.
So let me ask you, Diana, because I know that, like, if we have a patient, when I was working at the James and we had a patient who was bone marrow. So let's say there was on the bone marrow transplant floor. We kind of knew what their progression was going to be, right? So they come in day 1 for their bone marrow transplant. We know by day 3 or 4, they're going to start getting sick. We know that they're going to start needing oxygen and supportive measures, blood products, and they may tank, but we already have the system in place to get them back to where they need to be, because we're anticipating it. Now that you guys are in week 5, do you see that they're going down the same course so that you at least know what to expect?
So what they're starting to see is that they could kind of see, they kind of could see the progression of patients. One of the things is that they're trying now not to put people on vents as quickly as we were in the beginning, because some of the things that the providers were saying, that we're used to putting someone on a vent when they're coding, they're arresting, they're not speaking. Literally, you have someone who's sitting at 30%, but they're fine. They're texting, they're talking to their family, and it's like, okay, you have to get off FaceTime now because we have to intubate you. And the patient's like, why? I feel fine. So now there is a different progression. It's like, okay, let's increase your oxygen. Let's put you on a high flow mask. Let's prone you. Move to your left. Move to your right. Sit up. Like, there's other like interventions where instead of just going straight into drinking someone, putting them on a vent. So we're starting to see that. What has been really scary for the staff, though, is how quickly the patients turn. From 1 second to the next, the patient is fine. You could, nurses have said, I just turned around to pour a cup of water for my patient, and we were talking, and all of a sudden the patient's not speaking anymore, and they're gone. And that's been very traumatizing. No warning sign, vitals were fine, nothing else going on. And that's also like a very scary thing for the staff to deal with. But we are trying to see that we're starting to get a little bit more conservative with, instead of going straight to a vent. Of course, there's still the people who need it, but they're still turning. Their proning is huge. Proning our patients is huge. So those are the things we're starting to see.
That is that's horrible. I remember working in the James and being a float nurse in that hospital. I saw patients come in on day of diagnosis and for treatment. There were certain treatments in the cancer world where you have to get it inpatient. You can't get it outpatient. So they will come in, like bone marrow. They will come in and they will start their treatment, and you will see them progress. And sometimes you see them progress till discharge and recovery. But a lot of times you saw them progress to death. And that was very worrisome and wearisome on you, because you will have these patients for months at a time, and you will watch them go from floor to floor to floor, step down ICU, all of that. And that was it was overwhelming. Oncology is overwhelming. That's why I'm not in it anymore. But the thing that really got me, Diana and ladies, was seeing your coworkers who then were diagnosed with cancer that you had to take care of. And you knew what was coming. They knew what was coming, but you couldn't stop the train. You just had to ride it. And watching them with their families around at their last breath and crying, and seeing them in pain, seeing them nauseous, seeing them lose their hair, and having to walk into that room as a colleague and a nurse, and you have to be stoic for them, and walking out and breaking down. I cannot imagine what that is like for the people on the front line now, because not only are you watching your coworkers drop, you're thinking to yourself, am I next? Could this be me? Cancer isn't contagious.
Right. And that's why it's important for mental health.
Furious.
Yeah.
Mental health is so important for us people on the front line, because the trauma, the level of trauma we deal with every day, all day.
Every day.
But we have to keep pushing. We have a social duty to, protect and care for these patients. And the level of trauma that we experience is unbelievable.
And I think that's why when people, the whole stay at home, you stay at home, I'll stay at work so you can stay, whatever they say, stay at home to keep us safe, or whatever they're saying, or whatever. That thing is so real. And people don't understand why they're being asked to stay at home. It's because we're trying to protect the healthcare system. We're trying to protect you, but we're also trying to protect our healthcare workers. Because if everybody gets sick at once,
it would take care of them.
Forget it.
And I would tell you that there is like just a level of anger. Like New York City has a stay at home, and for the most part, people are doing a really great job. But sometimes when it's nice out, parents want to bring out their kids. The kids are in school. On Saturday, my son is 18 and my daughter's 10. So we went for a walk. They hadn't been out in a whole month, I think 4 or 5 weeks. And I said, okay, let's go for a walk. It's early. I regretted it instantly. I was like a hot mess the whole entire walk. I didn't want people to walk anywhere near them. Did they touch something, Penelope? Wow. Hold your hands like this. Don't touch your face. Don't touch your mask. And I think I probably traumatized them. So I told my husband, I said, I don't think I'm going to do this again. You're going to have to do it on your own. But even I was walking home and I walked past a playground, a park, and there were people outside with their children and their toddlers, and they're on the monkey bars. And I got home and told my husband, I was almost the lady on the news that was yelling at people to go home in the street. I told him, I said, I was so angry. I was so angry. I said, I've had 4 of my staff members get sick. One of them was very sick, and thank God he came back, but he's still fatigued. He's still tired. And we're risking our lives to take care of other people. And here you are, like, my toddler leaves to run around in the park, and there's 25 of us congregating in a circle. No, it's not okay. And and that part also makes you very angry. It is
traumatic.
Yeah, it is traumatic.
It's traumatic.
Something she mentioned about the children. I mean, I think that's something important to really pay attention to. And even Portia made mention of her awareness with their own children, checking in with them often. And sometimes we don't realize some of the precautions and the measures that we know as adults we're trying to protect them from. They don't always understand it on the level that we do. So in their mind, they're very concrete, and all they think is, oh, I can't go outside. You're stopping me. Mom, you're mean now. What is going on? You're irritated, whatever the words they might use that reflects that they see irritation in you. They see perhaps that restriction and that stay in the house, stop doing this, don't look at people, don't let anyone touch you, don't touch the wall. I mean, so it does in some ways increases that anxiety in them. And to talk about the post, I don't even want to imagine what the post-COVID mental health is going to be. Yeah. I'm just already thinking in my head how things that people never thought they would deal with or have to deal with are going to deal with it now. And now they're going to understand, wow, I get why anxiety is the way it is. Because people will minimize anxiety in a minute. People will minimize OCD kinds of stuff in a minute. But some of the same things we're doing now could be very well reflected in that. So I just can't imagine post-COVID mental health.
We definitely are operating in a season where there is a need for greater grace.
Yes.
And understanding. And that, I feel like we forget about that, where we are so staunch. So as a woman of faith in a Christian community, I was very angry, and I am still angry with churches who refuse to acknowledge the very realness of this. And as leaders, we have to do a better job of setting good examples.
Yes.
And when we are setting an example that says we will defy orders, we will defy science, we will defy, whatever, people who have, studied infectious diseases and know a lot more than what we know, we don't want to talk to you right now. We want you to shh, because God said. God didn't say that. You can't make me believe that God told you to keep your church open when there's a pandemic. I just don't believe that. And I could be wrong, but I don't believe it. And it makes me even more angry at the people who just follow sheepishly without any care, without any thought. You're just showing up every Sunday and every day during the week that you have service with hundreds of other people. And you're just like, oh, God to keep me. Okay, but let's say he does keep you, but is he going to keep the people that you have to pass in the grocery store? Is he going to keep them people too? And the people at the gas station and the people in your home? And if you have to go to work, is he going to keep those people too? So it's just like, come on, y'all. Like we have to do better.
It's about protecting each other and loving each other. And, that's what, some of the people, I'm very religious. I went 16 years of Catholic school, including college. And, we get into a lot of debates with people. And I said, part of being religious or having faith or whatever, I was like, it's also loving each other.
Yeah.
I said, and part of loving each other, you have to take care of each other. I said, so if you're going out and you're in crowds, you're not loving other people. You're not caring for other people. You're selfish. You're just thinking about what your need is. And I don't think people are getting that this is also about taking care of each other. And the way that we take care of each other and we show love for each other is by staying in place if you can. If you don't need to leave your house, it's very difficult. I understand that. But that's the best way that we're going to take care of each other.
I agree. Tarsha, what are you seeing in the community health world? How are you guys adapting to all of this?
So we are getting there. We're preparing. And like Diane, I heard you say, we are preparing for a surge and we might not get it. So I know the hospitals are going to get this, but we're ready for trying to prepare for recovery. I have patients that before they went into the hospital, they didn't have primary care physicians. These are people that, and they know that they have to reach out to local health departments and the community health centers if they didn't have primary care physicians before this, the COVID-19. So we are getting those calls. and we're trying to prepare for them. And the uncertainty of, I was found myself wanting to call Washington State, talk to somebody at their community health center, because we really don't know. We don't know how long we should keep these patients at home and possibly do just telehealth until we feel like they're safe to come into the office. But, they're afraid, and we're trying to keep them out. Do we, is it 6 weeks? Is it 8 weeks? We don't know. We don't know. So, because you can be asymptomatic, and it's so many different, you've heard so many different scenarios. We've heard people that tested positive, like before you go into the hospital, and on day 27, this patient retested and still has a positive test. So, and we don't have the rapid test right now. I heard that I don't know if you guys have it yet, Diana, like when we were I'm talking to my reps from vendors, and they were like, all the rapid tests are being sent out, like the analyzers and kits that you can do really fast are being sent out to the hotspots. So still, we just don't know. It's a lot of uncertainty. A lot of people are nervous. The phones are crazy because patients are calling, people are calling in the community. They want help, and we can't tell you to come. They want to be tested. Why can't I be tested? So we're dealing with all that, and just trying to help our hospitals and just stay ready. We don't, so that's
and
about
the testing is like a issue in this country. I have a family member who was refused testing, and she has all of the symptoms of COVID, all of them, in Florida, which really ticks me off when I find an article this morning that says a whole island in Florida, was able to buy antibody testings because they're the wealthiest zip code in the country. That bothered me. That bothered me to no end. And
sorry.
And every state, there's no nationwide guidance or system in place for testing. Every state is doing something different.
Oh, yeah.
And in Ohio, you have to call your PCP. If you don't have one, you have to call the ODH. It's not like that in Florida.
Okay.
The PCP can write you an order and send you on your way. Everybody is funneled through this hotline. Except for that one island, because they probably just, and the athletes, of course, and the people in Congress and the celebrities.
And the people in the community, they see that. They say, well, how are the basketball players being tested? How are all these people? And I can't get, I know I have it. So, it takes a long time to triage, because you're trying to give them some reassurance and telling them what to do to try to stay safe. And I do let them know I understand. I understand how you're feeling. Yeah.
And even as a healthcare provider, I got tested. I have asthma, and I was feeling short of breath about 3 weeks ago. And when I say I had to fight to get tested. And I'm calling people that are head of infectious disease, explaining why I need to be tested as a physician.
Wow.
ENT physician, like we are in the upper aerodigestive tract, and ENTs are getting sicker at higher rates because we are exposed to the viral load in the nasal pharynx and all these areas that this virus lives. That's what we do every day.
Right.
And so, we've been very selective on what we're doing to limit our exposure, but I had to fight as a doctor to get tested.
Being patient.
I spent probably I've made 6 calls that lasted almost an hour each just to get tested. And it's just like, I could only imagine how they're being offered to just the general public, because I had to fight, and I'm a physician.
I know.
Luckily, it was negative.
Right.
But I was quarantined for a moment of time while I waited for the test to come back. It took 4 days. And I'm like, why is it taking so, so I share all the anxieties the general public has, because it was hard going through all of that.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to go ahead and answer a couple questions. We didn't get any in the comments, but I'm going to ask a few questions from most of you guys that I think people may want to know as they trickle in or watch it later. Okay. So we'll start with Mrs. Hill. So if we're going to tackle this mental aspect of all of this, I guess one of my questions is this. What would you suggest for people to do to keep their mental health up to par or healthy, part one? And then the other question that I have is, what signs of depression do you think people should look out for? If you just had to maybe run down a list really quickly of different signs that people should be looking out for when it comes to depression, and what they need to do to accommodate that, if you will.
Okay. So certainly increased sleep or changes in your sleep in general. So it could be just staying up all night or whatever, because you're not having a regular sleep pattern. So changes, I'll just say very broadly, changes in sleep, changes in appetite, changes in your response to things, such as your mood changing, more depressed, more down and out, more sad, more irritable, more upset, more angry, more frustrated, things like that from your normal baseline mood and presentation. Also just different things that have changed in your routine. Now we know, again, from the standard of staying at home, et cetera, but create another routine of day to day, even in your stay at home orders kind of mode. So if that is getting up normally about a certain same time, getting up and getting dressed and moving about, so you kind of wash and all of those things. So again, getting a new normal for the moment, to keep some sort of pattern. That's going to help increase your mood. It's going to keep you kind of focused and motivated versus just staying in the bed all day. Some other things, create some new fun things to do. Those self-care things that we have normally done, again, to escape, to get away, to move about life, we can't do those. So now create another thing, create another activity or something that your family is going to do. We're going to have a game night. We're going to have this night. We're going to have that, or whatever the case may be. So again, being able to create something fun or something else that is more self-care, motivation, that kind of thing. So I would say definitely changes in sleep, appetite, your mood and presentation, creating some other self-care kinds of things, even within this stay-at-home order.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Dr., how do you pronounce your name? Faison or Farson?
Faison.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. My question for you would be, what do you suggest to someone who thinks they have signs and symptoms of this COVID-19? And also the second part of that would be, what suggestions or tips do you have to promote good lung health? Because I know that the lungs is a major part of trying to keep yourself healthy at home if you can't make it to the hospital.
Yeah, so the main symptoms to look out for: fever, cough, shortness of breath, and then again, that decrease in smell. And so again, it's weird. This virus, there's either two cohorts. You either have a mild disease where you're able to stay home. It's kind of like the common cold. You don't feel well. Some people have sore throat, but that's really not characteristic. But, and they can just be at home and, Tylenol, we say to limit Motrin, because there was preliminary data saying that patients may have had a worse outcome with Motrin, but just managing yourself at home. And then there's the other cohort where they get really sick. And so I say, if you're at home managing your symptoms and you have fever that is not responsive to Tylenol, so you're taking Tylenol every 6 hours, upper limit, I believe, is 2 grams. Again, like Portia mentioned, you have to watch out for your liver. But if your fever is not going away with Tylenol at home, you should be seen. If you start having shortness of breath that is different than if you have, like for me, I had asthma, and I said, this is a little different than what I'm used to having with my asthma exacerbation. So I said, I need to be seen. And so I think it's an issue where people are staying home too long. It's like, oh, I can get through this. It's just another common cold, or it's just something I can get over. But you have to be mindful that you could be in that group that's going to get very sick. And it progresses really fast. Just as Diane was mentioning, you could be fine 1 minute and then dying the next. And so it's just one of those things where I usually try to counsel patients, if, again, your fever is not going away with Tylenol, if you're feeling short of breath, really short of breath, that's abnormal, be seen immediately. Do not stay home and think, oh, I'll just put Vicks Vapor Rub on my chest, or I'll, just be mindful that you could be in a group that could potentially get very sick. And so it's okay to stay home. I mean, the official recommendation is if you're starting to feel sick, you should self-quarantine for 14 days. That is the general rule if you start to feel sick. But it's being mindful of when something is different or when it's changing. We don't want you to stay home. We want you to come be seen in the emergency department. And so just be on the lookout and just know your body. Pay attention, because some things you you can feel it. You can feel different. And if you don't feel comfortable managing your symptoms at home, go to the emergency department. No one's going to fault you for saying, I'm worried about how I'm feeling. I'm worried about this virus. Or if you're sick, they'll test you, especially if you have those 3: fever, cough, or shortness of breath. In terms of how to keep your lungs healthy, I think it just really goes off to how do you keep your immune system built up? And it's, eating a well-balanced diet, taking vitamins, making sure you're not out in the public without a mask. And also this is an opportunity to mention why the recommendation is to wear a mask. Initially, you're at a higher risk of contaminating yourself by wearing a mask. And that's why the CDC in the beginning, when this all came out, we don't recommend masks because the risk of self-contamination, because you're touching your face, is so high. And if you're sick, you should wear a mask. That was the initial recommendation. But now it's to protect everybody. So everybody should have a mask on in public. And so I would say, if you're out in public, make sure you wear a mask. Wash your hands, at least 20 seconds, hot water. Again, thinking about the virus, it has an envelope. It's made of fat. Soap dissolves the fat. You got to wash your hands. And if you're in your car or moving, if you're, making errands for the day that you need to do that are essential, then carry hand sanitizer. Again, and just paying attention to your body, but it's really just about keeping yourself safe. If you have chronic lung disease, make sure you have an extra stock of your medications. If you have asthma or COPD, I went to the pharmacy and made sure I still had refills because, there's every now and then you get to the pharmacy and they say, you have no more refills. And you're like, what? And the way things have shut down with being seen at clinic, yeah, they're doing virtual visits, but if you need your medication and you're running low and you go to the pharmacy, you don't have any refills, that's not good. And so if you have chronic lung disease, making sure you have all of your inhalers. If you have diabetes, make sure you have all of your medications. So it's really about supporting yourself, take your medications, and washing your hands and just the overall general health things.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I have one more question. This is for you, Miss Diana. So being
I had to step off.
Oh no.
But
okay, wait, no, that's okay. It's okay. We have a million nurses on here. So being a nurse right now and going and being in the front line and going to the hospitals and even a doctor having to still treat these patients, what do you suggest to newer nurses, newer doctors, newer CNAs, techs, whoever, people who have to still go out and face this and deal with the public, if you will? What do you suggest that they do to keep going? Like, what words of encouragement could you give people who might see this later?
Sure.
I would start by saying that the American Nurses Association just released their statement on COVID, their official statement on COVID as related to nursing and ethics and how we manage, as far as the code of ethics for our duty to self and our duty to patient. And you have to first make sure that you're safe. You being safe is, if you can't protect yourself, you can't take care of a patient. So you got to have proper PPE. And if you are backed against the wall with the employer who is not providing proper PPE and the support, is that really where you want to be? So you have to make sure that you are protecting yourself by protecting your patients and your other peers. That's first and foremost, understanding what your duty to yourself is. And then the second thing is, I would say, stay prayed up.
I agree.
Stay prayed up. And
Absolutely.
Have your support.
That's it, Portia. I agree.
Right?
Yes. Our profession is a calling. We everybody can't do it. Everybody can't do it. So you have to dig in and think about what put you there. And some will not finish the course, but that's okay, because that means they're not supposed to be there. Yeah, it's special.
It is.
Yeah, it's true.
And coming in right now as a new nurse, I don't know. I don't know. And I'm not going to pretend like I won't know, because I've been in the game for a minute. But if I was just coming into the game, I don't know. I'm seeing what I'm seeing. But as seasoned nurses, even more so now, we have to let the new nurses know this is what we do. And this is how we do it. We cannot sacrifice the safety of the public and the safety of our patients' health because our government is out of control. we still know how to practice, and we still know what quality care looks like. And when you can no longer provide quality care, that becomes a safety issue. And you have a duty to buck against that system, according to the American Nurses Association. So when people tell you, no, you got to be quiet, you got to roll over and take it, that is not true. And stay prayed up.
Right. Yeah. And know when you need to take a step away. To be honest, you have to be, and I understand, you know, resources and income, but you have to know you do more harm than good if you really can't be there at the moment. I mean, we've had people that will come out, you know, on news flashes and say they just had to walk away. It's unfortunate, but it's almost healthier for them to do that than to maintain and not be in a healthy state, caring for those that are not.
I think people forget that pre-COVID, we all had our stuff that we had to deal with.
Good point.
That stuff didn't change. It didn't go away. You know, on top of the stuff, now we have to deal with COVID. But we still have that stuff. And if we already had poor self-management skills, or we already had anxiety, or we already had piss poor support systems, that stuff just walked right into the COVID season with us. So it's like you still have to be aware of that stuff as well. And when it overwhelms you, you need to know when it's time for you to take a step back. When is it, am I exhibiting the signs of depression? Am I depressed? Like, is this a thing? Like, do I need to talk to somebody? And the great thing that has come out of this is that we have a lot of telehealth mental health services now, whereas before they didn't want to pay for it. But look, just like that, you have access. So reach out. And what I love in our community now is that we have more people who look like us, who are in that space and who are in that field, and who can take not only the fact that we're going through this pandemic, but they're taking it from the lens and the perspective of your community and helping you through it. And I do love that about that. We coming up, and I remember being a young girl, and I remember when you were doing, Carmela, when you were going to school, and people would look at you like, why are you going to school for that kind of stuff? Right. What does that mean? And you just like, you put a deaf ear to it, and you was like, because this is just what I want to do, and I feel like this is what I need to be. But I remember that 20-something years ago, where there were not that many people of color, of faith, who were bringing out into that field. And now look, now you're right in the position to help the very people.
I know, yeah.
Oh, it's awesome. It's an awesome feeling.
The very people who shunned you. The very people who said,
are calling, are texting, are emailing, are it's amazing. It's really amazing. But I give God praise for it, you know, because when you don't know, but you do know, you know, I think of myself as like a Joseph. It's like prepared and underground, but when the time came, here we are.
Here you are, yeah.
Here you are, ready to fight the good fight. And I thank you ladies for taking time to talk about it. I'm so sorry that we had so many technical difficulties, but it'll be posted and people can watch it and, you know, say whatever. So please share it and let people know they need the information, because the information that is out here is so noisy in the world today. It's so noisy. And when it becomes noisy, we start making up our own narrative about it. Because it's so noisy, and I don't want that to happen. But what I am going to do this weekend is that I'm going to take a break because it's too much. Let me tell you what got me this morning with the Florida Island. That got me, and then I saw a tweet saying take back Virginia. You saw the protesting in Michigan, and now from the White House they're saying take back Virginia. That got me, and I said, you know what? I need to step away. I need to step away because it's too much. And that will create a whole level of anxiety because you can't do anything about it. And when you can't do anything, that's the worst kind of anxiety, because you sitting up like, rocking back and forth, thinking about it, and you have no say over the ignorance of people.
It's true.
So we're going to do our part and keep our community abreast of facts and of information. And then hopefully people can make informed decisions, and we're going to take it from there.
Awesome. That's all we can do.
That's all we can do. All right, ladies, I appreciate you. I'm going to try to figure out a way to make sure that this saves.
Okay.
So that it doesn't go away.
Good.
I can see some chat on here, Jeanette, on YouTube.
But it's together.
Weird. Yeah, but it's all good.
It's all good.
It's all good. All right. Thanks, ladies.
Wonderful, you guys.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Okay.
So that okay, I think we're good.
You start recording?
I think we're good. So I'm gonna end this meeting.
Also,
Huh?
it's live on my screen.
Right. I'm
still
going
says live
to
on mine.
stop it now, and I think that we're gonna be good.
Yeah, I think it'll eventually catch up, probably.
All right. Bye.